Crimson Crossover Network. This is The Tide Machine with Charles Branch and Michael Southern. Welcome into The Tide Machine. I am Charles Branch with Michael Southern. We talked about it last week. The Alabama-Oklahoma series has not been favorable to Alabama, and unfortunately, another chapter of that series did not go Alabama's way this past Saturday as Alabama fell short 23-21 in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Michael, it was a tough weekend. How are you feeling? How are you coping? Are you still on the bandwagon? Or where are you after a tough loss to the Sooners this past week?
No, I'll never get off the bandwagon, win or lose. Believe me, I've been through a lot worse losses and a lot worse seasons. This still has the chance to be a really good season, so I hope they don't let this one loss derail everything. Usually when Alabama has a loss like that, yeah, I pretty much lose interest the rest of the day. I didn't even watch like the Georgia-Texas game, and I sure as heck didn't listen or any online podcast the rest of the night or all Sunday. So the only thing I did was I watched any podcast I watched. It was not college football related over the whole weekend. I just tried to ignore it. But yes, Oklahoma right now is one of those programs that just has Alabama's number for some inexplicable reason. There's a hard way. I don't have a way to explain how, because there have been multiple times I really felt Alabama was the better team and they should have won. Credit to Brent Venables. We talked about it last week. He has been a thorn in Alabama's side during his tenure at Oklahoma as DC, as his tenure at Clemson as DC, and now as the Oklahoma head coach. Think about this. He is 2-0 against Kalen DeBoer. Who would have thought that at this point? But give Oklahoma credit. They took advantage of all the mistakes that Alabama did, and they won the game, and Alabama did not, despite pretty much dominating in every statistical category except the scoreboard and turnovers. And those are the things that just doomed them that day. They could not overcome all that despite a great effort by the defense. I thought the defense played admirably. They did everything they could given the poor field position that they were put in time and time again. So credit to the defense for keeping that game so close.
You know, the most yards that Oklahoma gained in one single drive all day was 41 yards, and that was coming out of halftime where they did capitalize on a field goal. But you're right. I actually feel like Alabama gifted Oklahoma 20 points, not just the 17 points off turnovers, because Oklahoma's first 3 points that came on the field goal early in the first half, Alabama punts it to Oklahoma, and you had a guy there to make the tackle, and he slips free and takes it all the way inside the Alabama 40-yard line. One of the more interesting things about this series, and it's not a series that still has a lot of depth to it. You know, it's only the 8th time that Alabama and Oklahoma have faced each other. But in Oklahoma's 5 wins against Alabama, they have won the turnover battle in every game, and they've won it by a minimum margin of 2. So, and when you extrapolate it for the 5 games and you total up all the turnovers, Oklahoma has had 3 turnovers in those games. Alabama has had 16. And in 4 of those 5 games, the defense for Oklahoma has scored a touchdown. The only time Oklahoma won the game and did not score a touchdown on defense was when they were number 1 in the country in 2003 and beat an Alabama team that it would eventually be 4-9 in Mike Shula's first year. So whenever we play Oklahoma again, I think that's the first thing that I'm going to be focused on is, can Alabama win the turnover battle? Because when we did win we actually didn't win the turnover battle. Neither team turned the ball over in the Orange Bowl in 2019. But that has been, in addition to Brent Venables, the turnovers have been a thorn in Alabama's side. And one of the things we talked a lot about last week of this Alabama-Oklahoma series, and really talking about the turn of the century, the 2002-2003 game, talked a lot about the pride of the Tide. So one play that I want to highlight from this past weekend was a negative play. It's the play that Oklahoma took back for a touchdown, the interception that Ty Simpson threw. But what I feel like I want to highlight about that play is Ty throws it, and even though he didn't get the Oklahoma defender down on the play, he showed a lot more effort than our quarterback did last year. And so, you know, it's a negative play, and I've been called a sunshine pumper in the past. Maybe I'm trying to put some sunshine on it. Maybe I'm trying to be overly positive, but I can at least appreciate the effort of Ty to try to go make the play. And I should throw Michael Carroll in there as well, the true freshman right tackle who's now getting a lot more reps. But I think that is something that we've seen a lot from this Alabama team is when you're hit with adversity, you don't tuck your tail, you don't go kick slide out of bounds. You fight, you keep playing, and you try to make a play. And so we got 2 games left in the regular season. We're still competing to be in the SEC championship and still very much competing for a college football playoff. And so I still feel very confident about this Alabama team. And I think they've earned that confidence, especially with how the year started and how everybody was down on them after the Florida State game. That this is a team that is going to find a way to win and find themselves in the college football playoff. And as we talk about in the NCAA tournament, all you got to do is get there and give yourself a chance. And that's really just what I want for this team because I do think once they get in the college football playoff that they've got the ability to do some special things.
Well, no one's questioning, and I don't question the effort, even though the execution had a lot to be desired on certain. Again, it's like everything else. Go back to like there were about 5 to 6 plays. If you just take one of those plays away, there's a good chance Alabama wins. But the fate wasn't with them that day. But the effort was there. I don't have any problem with the effort, both on offense or defense. Execution struggled at times, little sloppy here and there, but there was no doubt they were trying. It was not. They didn't lose because of lack of effort. How about that? And I don't think that's the case. Ever since Florida State, that has not been an issue. I don't suspect that will be an issue going forward. I like the progression of the defense. It's come along a lot better than I thought it would about 4 or 5 games ago. I did not think it was going to progress to where they're at. Offense has got to, I think it's a combination of this. The defense has gotten better, but there's a lot of tape out there on Alabama's offense now. Everyone knows the strengths and weaknesses, what Alabama can do well and what they cannot do well. And you're about to play. You've already played some of the best defenses in the SEC. So don't think for a second they don't know how to attack. I think you saw that a little bit too. And I don't know. You would think through all these decades of these intermittent games there wouldn't be a common thread, but you pulled it out. Every single one of them, and they're not related. None of those games leads to the next. But it's just ironic when you look back at the statistics that you just said, how common it is, and why does that happen only against Oklahoma? It's funny how sports works. You always see that, whether it's individual sports like in tennis or something like that, someone will have someone else's number no matter what happens, and that's just the sports gods just messing with everybody, keeping everybody humble. I guess this is our lesson in humility that for right now, Oklahoma owns us most of the time. I'm not saying that Alabama will never beat Oklahoma again. I'm sure that they will, but at least right now in this current series, right now Oklahoma has the upper hand, and it's been that way now for a better part of 2 to 3 decades. Hopefully that will change going forward, but that was a little frustrating on that. But I do think Alabama, I think they'll be fine. Obviously, they'll be fine, I believe, this week. And I think the effort will be there, especially when they go down to the worst village on the plains. They'll go down there in 2 weeks, and we'll see how that plays out. But I don't think they'll have any issue with effort, that's for sure.
Saturday was the first time Alabama also lost on homecoming since 2001, when Alabama lost to LSU 35-21. Nick Saban was on the LSU sidelines for that game.
Yep.
And as I thought about that not only was homecoming very late in the season this year, but you're having to have homecoming against the number 11 team in the country in Oklahoma. And so I wanted to pose the question to you, Michael. College football continues to change. Traditions continue to change. We're seeing A-Day potentially go away. Do you think something like homecoming could potentially go away as you move to a 9-game SEC schedule and where your non-conference schedule is basically all front-loaded with games in early September?
Well, the A-Day makes sense because that is a non-revenue game, and it makes sense that you can culminate spring practice and have a spring concert and make money. I don't necessarily buy into the fact that the tradition of homecoming, not just for Alabama, but for college football in general, will ever go away. Now, you're right. Traditionally, you would have homecoming probably about anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 way into the season. And a lot of times you will have a non-conference opponent sprinkled in there. Again, it's a chance to add some festivities, hopefully get a guaranteed win. And because you're playing a non-traditional opponent, it ensures you have a good home crowd. Well, you're not going to need that going forward because they're all going to be SEC opponents and pretty good Power 4 teams in the non-conference. But I don't think from the tradition standpoint of homecoming, I don't think that's something that's ever going to go away, at least in the Southeastern Conference. That is one thing that I think most of the Southern schools are pretty traditional about it. It is about pomp, circumstance, and pageantry, and that's something that you get from homecoming. You don't. It's not an issue that you need something different for revenue. So unless it's somehow you could boost revenue from that, I think that would be the only way that any of the administrations would think about changing that from a perspective in the fall when it comes to homecoming and welcoming alumni back, having the tradition of a homecoming queen, the governor there, all that stuff. I don't think that will change unless there's a way to if you eliminate it and you found another $5 to $6 million worth of revenue out of it. But to me, that's the only way that might force that lever to happen.
Yeah, my question really kind of circulated around it that I know on the TV broadcast for the game, they mentioned that it was homecoming for Alabama, and Oklahoma took that as disrespect. Now, of course, you're going to take that wasn't meant as disrespect to Oklahoma. We know that. We knew Oklahoma was going to be a good team this year. But if you're a team like Oklahoma, you take whatever bulletin board
Oh
material
yeah.
you can get, just like any SEC team would. So that's kind of my question around it is as tough as the SEC is, and we've seen the bottom be really good this year as well, even though the records may not show it. We've seen Kentucky push Texas. We've seen Mississippi State push teams close to the brink. And so I just wondered from a football coach perspective, if you're Kalen DeBoer and you're sitting here having to play the number 11 team in the country, why are we trying to give them more bulletin board material that they're coming in to Tuscaloosa on homecoming weekend and having to play Alabama? So I looked at it more from that standpoint of just how do you not give these really good teams more things to rally them around themselves? But I do understand your point, especially in this NIL era, that if you got $5 or $6 million that you can generate from just one game, you got to take that opportunity.
Well, now I agree with you on the sense as far as motivation. If you ask any college football coach, uh, do you want to have homecoming? They would probably say no because they don't want the distraction. And you're right. Depending on who you're playing, if you're playing a quality opponent, yeah, you don't want the extra motivation. So, absolutely. I think that'll change a little bit, though, especially in the SEC. Now that you're going to the 9 game schedule, most everyone's homecoming games are going to be against SEC opponents. So I think over the next coming years, that what they deem as a lack of respect, I think that will probably transition out because you're going to be forced at some point. A lot of your homecoming opponents are not going to be like the bottom dwellers of the SEC, and there's not really that many bottom dwellers to begin with. So it'll be very interesting to see how that develops. But yeah, I think if you ask any coach, they would say, yeah, I don't. Homecoming doesn't do anything for me, and if we didn't have it, it wouldn't bother me one bit.
Well, as we move from this past Saturday, we now finally get to play a team that's not ranked in the top 25 of college football. And I know LSU was not ranked when we played them, but they got as high as number 3 at one point this year before it fell apart. And we get to take it on a team that Alabama's never played in Eastern Illinois, an FCS team. I think I'm going to give you a softball question right here, but do you know the most famous Eastern Illinois football player?
Oh, East. No, I do not. You got me on this one.
Well, I'll give you a hint. He is a NFL broadcaster with Jim Nance most of the time.
With Jim. Wait a minute. Tony Romo.
Tony Romo played at Eastern Illinois.
Oh, why did I realize he played at Eastern? Okay, all right, Tony Romo. Oh, all right. Well, thankfully, Tony Romo will not be taking the field Saturday against Alabama.
You know how the NBA and the NCAA from an ESPN back in the day, they used to have announcer swaps. The NBA color analyst would go call an NCAA game, and an NCAA Jay Billis would go call an NBA game. You think Tony Romo would want to switch with like a Greg McElroy or a Kirk Herbstreit, and even if Eastern Illinois got destroyed, just to be in Bryant-Denny Stadium to be the color analyst for that game?
I bet he would enjoy that. I bet he would love to be able to come see his alma mater play and see him here in Bryant-Denny. I think that would be something. Now, a lot of people would tune in to listen to that. That would be a fun, and I think he'd get a kick out of it. I think that's a good idea. It's not going to happen because you're going to cross networks, but if you could, or if they could somehow do a simulcast and you could do it on both channels, that would be pretty interesting to listen to him because he does a pretty good job of predicting plays. So I'd like to see what he's calling like. Oh, Eastern Illinois is about to run this. Let's see what they do.
But one advantage Alabama has going into this game against Eastern Illinois is the father of our quarterback, Ty Simpson, the UT Martin coach. actually played Eastern Illinois earlier this year and got a win 27-20 in overtime a few weeks ago. So maybe Coach Simpson is sending a few scouting reports to Tuscaloosa just to help the Alabama team prepare. But since this is our first time playing against Eastern Illinois, and what we do at the Tide Machine is typically look back at the history of the series, there's not a series to review. But we
Nope.
have actually played a team from the state of Illinois, and it's a very famous game, Coach Bryant's last game in the Liberty Bowl. And so, Michael, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Coach Bryant's last game and that victory over Illinois back in the 80s.
Well, we were talking about this before. It's just odd that Alabama has not played only like twice before they played teams from the state of Illinois. This will be the third time. And the first time that they ever played was Tony Eason's Fighting Illini team in the Liberty Bowl in 1982. So it's very odd that the paths of Alabama and Illinois have not crossed more than just one time. And even other teams, like we talked about, Alabama's never played Northwestern. Again, it's just surprising because there are several schools that play football. You would have thought some of the other ones that Alabama would have had a bye game with. But I mean, the most famous one is against Illinois that they only played the one time in a freezing cold Liberty Bowl in Memphis with Coach Bryant's last game. And he was up there in like that big green parka to try to stay warm. I was still like in middle school. But, I talked to a lot of the sports writers when I came up that were still there that had covered Bryant, and they talked about how cold it was. Coach Bryant had a special event up in his hotel room the night before. They invited a lot of the sports writers up there. There's a very famous picture that he took with all the sports writers that covered Alabama. And Jimmy Smothers from the Gadsden Times was one of the ones that's in the photo. He showed me that photo. That was something that was very special to Jimmy. He passed away years ago. But when I worked in Gadsden, he showed me the photo, and that photo meant a lot. But Bryant had the whole sports writing crew there in his hotel suite the night before. He invited them up. He did that quite a bit on the road and in bowl games. I won't say they had a party, but let's just say they enjoyed themselves. Had a picture with them. It was a different environment back then when it came to media and coaches. Coach Bryant was a master. He did a really good job. I won't say of schmoozing the media, but he knew at that point how important the media was back then to promoting the program and how it was a good idea to have them on, I would say, on your side as much as possible. And then it meant a lot to those sports writers to be there for Bryant's final game. Again, Jeremiah Castile played the game of his life. If he doesn't have all those interceptions against Tony Eason, Alabama might have lost, and Coach Bryant might have lost his last game as a head coach. So it's really important that the team came through at that moment, at that time. But a lot of things culminated that night up in Memphis. Cold, Bryant's last game. I can imagine in the press box, too. I can imagine that with Bryant's final press conference, you probably had some of the old guard sports writers. They won't admit it, but they probably walked away with a tear in their eye. They're not going to say they did, but I bet you some of them probably did because they covered Bryant for years. They did the Skywriters tour. Coach Bryant, famously every summer or spring would have a party or cookout at his house. All the sports media would go there. I think it was like in May, but he would always have a big party at his house, and they would just laugh it up with Coach Bryant at his house all day and all evening. So I heard a lot of good stories about that. It was definitely nothing like it is now when it comes to the relationship between coaches and media. How about that?
Well, the younger generation, I think, is familiar with that game, not just from it being Coach Bryant's last game, but of course, the Alabama tradition video that's shown before games in Tuscaloosa. And when they throw up intensity and the big hit on the Illinois player, that typically gets a large reaction from the crowd. Would you have to say that's probably one of the top three hardest hits in Alabama football history? I mean, Cornelius Bennett's the sack has to be up there against Burline and Notre Dame. I'm going for recency bias, I guess. I'll throw Reuben Foster's hit on Leonard Fournette about a decade ago in Death Valley. But with how that one gets a reaction and has basically been immortalized in that video, I feel like that's got to be, if it's not in the top three, it's close to cracking the top three.
I would say it's definitely no worse than top five, definitely top three. The hit by Jeremiah Castile on that one for the pass to be incomplete. And you're right, whenever they play that video pregame, the crowd just goes, ooh, you hear it like echo throughout the stadium every time when you see Jeremiah come in and lay that hit. I mean, Jeremiah, he came in and look, Jeremiah Castile wasn't like a big defensive back, but he came in there and he hit with a lot of force and impact on that receiver. shoot, I wonder if today, if we get called for targeting, I need to go back and take a look at that. If that would be a penalty today for a defenseless receiver.
Adding some lore to that play. I remember when Coach Saban was chastising the fans for maybe not being as energetic in football games as he wanted them to be. And he used that play and that the fans weren't yelling boom as loud as they used to in the pregame warmups, trying to poke the fans a little bit and have them bring some more excitement to Alabama football games during his tenure at Alabama. But yeah, that's one of the few times that we've actually played a team from the state of Illinois. Now, we have had obviously a lot of games where we've played somebody for the first time and been an inferior opponent from the FCS, but the game I wanted to go to was from the 2010 season, Alabama playing Georgia State and playing against a familiar face on the other sidelines in Bill Curry, who was leading Georgia State into the FBS. They had also been an FCS program. I was a senior at Alabama at the time. And what I remember from that game is it was actually slated to be a Saturday game at the start of the year. And I think maybe after the loss to LSU and what Auburn had been doing that year, the decision was made to move that game from Saturday to Thursday night. And I know for Georgia State, that was great exposure because they actually had Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler. They had the whole game day crew calling the game on ESPN. Now, as you expect, Alabama came out, rolled to a 63-7 victory. It's actually highlighted on the Tide Machine Twitter account this week. So if you didn't see the highlights, go back and find them on Tuesday of this week when they were posted. But what I remember about that game, or really just the day of the game, you go from having school Wednesday to no school Thursday, and people already walking around and getting ready for tailgating. Galette's being open at 8 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. And it was just kind of a weird vibe all day, but it was also really cool as someone that before the NFL started having games on Thursdays and before Maction became a big thing where you had so many games during the week towards the end of the year. I remember growing up that Thursday night game being such a big deal and that it typically was some of the more mid-major, smaller programs, but it was a great opportunity for those programs to be shown in the national spotlight. And now you can find everybody on ESPN Plus or any channel out there. But it was really kind of cool to be able to have a Thursday night game. And also kind of interesting that as soon as the game was over and Friday rolled around, we were back in class, which was odd, which was kind of odd because we weren't going to have class the next week because it was Thanksgiving. And the university just decided that we weren't going to cancel class on Friday. We were going to make students go back to class. So you're walking across the quad all the way to Lloyd Hall through all the trash and all the, game day tents that were still set up. But I thought that was a really cool, just kind of moment and an opportunity to experience as a student. One of those moments that, would have liked to have had the opportunity to go down to Legion Field in Birmingham. I know Legion Field at that time wasn't going to be near as big enough for Alabama to host a game. But something as a student, I feel like that's something that I missed out on as an opportunity just when I was born, being able to go from Tuscaloosa to Birmingham as a student and watch a game in Legion Field. Now, of course, when I got to Alabama, they were building the zone. One of the zones had already been built. So Bryant-Denny Stadium was the place to be, but it was really cool having a Thursday game and being able to be a part of that. And it was kind of just a surreal day, having a big Alabama game on Thursday, and of course getting ready for the Iron Bowl that following week.
So it's funny you talk about as a student, you never got a chance to go to an Alabama game at Legion Field. The latter stages there in the 80s and 90s, it really had gotten to the point as Bryant-Denny got to be a better and better venue. The students really did not like going to Legion Field anymore. They really got tired of that. They were like, man, why do we have to get in a car and drive an hour, east for a home game in a stadium that now holds less than what we have in Tuscaloosa? They wanted to be on campus. It was totally different, obviously, in the 60s and 70s because that was when Legion Field was the largest stadium in the state. And I can see where the students thought it was an honor. Hey, we're going to the biggest, football stadium in the state. But I can tell you there, after Ray Perkins did the first expansion and put the upper deck in and they added the next one, by the time you got to the mid to late 80s and the 90s, They did not like the students hated going up to Legion Field at that point. They would much rather just stay in Tuscaloosa. And I remember that Georgia State game too. They moved that from Saturday to Thursday because the Iron Bowl was going to be on a Friday. It was the day after Thanksgiving, so you had one less day to prepare. And of course, that was the Cam Newton year. But anyways, I know the coaching staff wanted as much time as possible. But I remember from the media side, we always get all the media releases there, and then they were sending all these things out throughout the week, like, oh, because it's a Thursday night, make sure you know this, and parking's different here, and you got to go here, and classes will be until here before we clear everything out. They were doing all the logistics for that. And traditionally, there was only one other time that I personally remember Alabama played on a Thursday night, and that was when they played Vanderbilt. And I think that was in Nashville, and I can't remember if that was during Dubose, if that was the Dubose era or Franchione, but
it was Dubose. It was 1997.
Okay, yeah.
We won 20. I remember that game. We won 20-0.
That's like the only other time I ever remember Alabama football playing on a Thursday night for a regular season game, not a bowl game, but a regular season game. So that was a little odd going out there to cover that game on a Thursday night. But you're right, one-sided affair. It was interesting to have Coach Curry come back for the second time. He'd come back once with Kentucky, but here he was starting a program from scratch, and no one ever would have thought after 1989 that he would be back in 2010 as the head coach of Georgia State.
There might have been one more Thursday night game in Alabama history, and so you'll have to help me. I may have my weekdays messed up, but it was in 2001. So you had 9/11 happen, and that week of games, they canceled all those games, and that's when Alabama was supposed to play Southern Miss. And they moved the Southern Miss game to the end of the season. So Alabama beat Auburn 31-7 at Auburn, and then had to play Southern Miss in Legion Field to be bowl eligible. And I feel like I remember that being a weeknight game. I knew it was a night game, and not only was it a night game, but it monsooned that entire time because from Birmingham, and we didn't even go to the game. We had tickets for the game. Us and 70, however much Legion Field held at that time, 90% of that capacity did not show up to Legion Field because of how hard it was raining. If you ever go back and find the video of that game, I think that was a game where if you punted the ball stuck in the ground. You got no roll out of the punt. And I know the ball was on the turf multiple times throughout the night with how wet it was. So I'll have to go back and look. But I thought that might have been another Thursday night game in Alabama history that really just kind of came out of nowhere again because of an unfortunate tragedy, but how the game got moved towards the end of the year so Alabama could have an opportunity to be bowl eligible, and eventually did become bowl eligible, and would end up beating Iowa State 14-13, and then in the Independence Bowl that year in Dennis Franchione's first year.
Yeah, that 2001 year with Franchione, his first year there, that had a lot of unique twists and turns. At the end, it ended on a high note with the lopsided victory at Auburn that really turned the tide, literally, as far as the fan base is concerned. But that team was learning their way under the tutelage of Franchione, so they had growing pains, but you could see them building something, and you saw it at the end of the season, and of course you saw it kind of roll into 2002.
Well, I know we're excited about next week. We don't want to overlook our opponents. We don't want to underestimate opponents, but of course next week is the Iron Bowl, and there'll be a lot of history to talk about the Iron Bowl next week. So we're looking forward to getting into that, looking forward to sharing a lot of good memories, and we'll probably share some unfortunate memories as well. Of course, that's been a game that's had not only a huge impact within the state, but has had a huge impact across the country for many, many years now. But before we sign off, Michael, any closing thoughts about this past weekend, Eastern Illinois, or just the trajectory of this team as we get close to the end of the regular season?
I'm not worried about the trajectory of the team. I know some people are, and they're you have Alabama fans that go to one extreme or the other. Alabama gets a win, we're the greatest team ever. They get a loss, we suck. We're going to fire a coach. We're going to run the coach off. So try to be a little more even keel here. Try to look at it a little more analytically. I think they're going to be fine this week, and I think they're going to be fine going down to Auburn. They are going to play hard at Auburn. That is no doubt. Now, will any of that I don't know, Indian Burial Ground, Pet Cemetery, Voodoo Magic pop up? It could, but traditionally, if you go back and look at it, the better team usually wins most of the time. So Auburn's got a great defense. Let's see what they do offensively, but Alabama is the better team. So we'll be talking about it next week. So I look forward to it.
We look forward to that, and we continue to have a lot of things going on here at Crimson Crossover. We've obviously got our podcast, The Tide Machine. Don't miss the M3 show with Matthew, Mac, and Josh as they talk a little bit more present day Alabama football. They actually had Aaron Suttles on this week, and Aaron gave a lot of really good information about what's going on at Yay, Alabama. So I highly recommend listening to that podcast. We've got a lot of basketball going on right now. Michael and Emily are doing a great job on the Blue Collar podcast. We've got our regular Crimson Crossover podcast. I'm still rolling out episodes for Crimson Crossover Cross Court, which we'll have a couple of those as we get into next week as Alabama basketball heads to Las Vegas for the Players Era tournament. And I know Christian just recorded another episode of Golf Adjacent with Cannon Claycomb, and that should be coming out here very soon. So I know we won't get to talk beforehand, Michael, and to our audience, but I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We're very thankful that you give us your time to listen to us, all your retweets, all your likes, all your comments from our podcast, from the post on X. We love doing this. We love talking about Alabama football, and we feel very honored that we have the opportunity to share our history with you as well as Alabama football history. So with that, we'll sign off this week and get ready for a really fun week next week talking about the Iron Bowl. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
The Paul W. Bryant Museum is a captivating destination for sports enthusiasts and fans of the University of Alabama football program. Located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the museum is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. The Paul W. Bryant Museum showcases a remarkable collection of memorabilia, including trophies, photographs, and artifacts that span Bryant's career and the rich history of Alabama football. Visitors can explore interactive exhibits and learn about the team's storied past, making the Paul W. Bryant Museum a must-visit for any football aficionado. Fans can also experience exhibits highlighting success of both the Alabama men's basketball and women's softball programs. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Plan your visit today and experience the rich tradition of Alabama athletics. Roll Tide.